Hi everybody, Rob here with Velocity Portfolio. In today's video, in addition to my normal weekly recap, which is week 28 of fully living out of my brokerage account, I'm going to go over just how I invest all of my income on a given Friday or whenever I receive any type of supplemental income in addition to mine or my wife's paycheck. So I'll take a little bit more in-depth approach and show you guys my thought process and what I look at before I make purchases typically on Fridays. So first, we'll cover what we do with this channel. All of mine and my wife's W-2 income goes into this taxable brokerage account which is with Schwab, and I call it Velocity Portfolio. It's invested into these three categories, and I shoot for these percentage allocations. And then all of my expenses throughout the month are paid from this portfolio on margin, borrowed at 7% interest rate from Schwab. That money's withdrawn and then pays all of my expenses. Dividends and option income that I'll go over here in a second pays down that margin balance throughout the month. Eventually, the total dividends and option income will exceed my expenses, and at that point, I am financially independent and my portfolio can sustain my lifestyle. So that's what we're shooting for. I do monthly recaps to show how that progress is going, and then I do weekly recaps like this video to show how we're doing on a little bit more microscopic level. So let's dive right into it. Going over to the dashboard here. My gross account value sits at $198,000. I'm a little over 6 months into this strategy and close to hitting 200K gross value, which I'm very excited about. Hoping to hit it next week if the portfolio and, of course, the market holds up. Margin balance is currently sitting at $59,039, so that gives me a net account value of $138,978. My equity percentage is 66%. I've mentioned many times that my threshold is 60%, so I am 6% away from that threshold. And I don't shoot for 50% like most people do. I shoot for 60 because I do sell options out of this account, which I will go over here in a second, and why I choose that 10% kind of buffer between 60 and 50%. My current blended dividend yield is 11.13%, which is estimated about $1,839 per month. For the month of April so far, I've received $596 in dividends, and I've made $512 in options premium. So that gives me a total income for the month of $1,109. My trailing 6 month average expenses is $12,890. So when you take, hypothetically, this current amount minus my trailing 6 months, if the month ended today, this is how much I would need to withdraw from my account in order to pay all of my bills on average. Going down to the allocations of my portfolio, they are finally where they are supposed to be. So they're all pretty dead even. They're technically never going to hit my target allocation here because I'm always going to have some in options that are assignments. And then I have the Velocity Impact Fund, which is going to grow more. I'll do an update on that soon, but I do have some more money coming from Google AdSense from YouTube. Didn't get a payout last month, but I do have one coming this month. Once I receive that, I'll do an update on that. So we are there for my allocations, finally where I want them to be. And this week was the first week that I did not invest in growth for a little while. When I made purchases into the high yield category and the dividend growth category this week with my deposited money, my growth category was just shy of 25%. And then this is after I made those buys, it came down a little bit, but you can see they're all pretty dead even as far as where I want them to be in relation to where they are. So very happy about that. I was able to put quite a bit of money into high yield, which is helping to increase this yield and this monthly dividend. So I'll show exactly what I bought there in a second. For individual diversifications in the portfolio, this is what we're looking at. Still Starbucks, XTTE, and Pepsi are the top holdings, but all below 10% finally. They were up 15, 16, 17% at one point, so they're coming down closer to my target per ticker is 5%, no more than 5%. So right now I've got 4 that are above that, and they are coming down as I purchase more. And then going down to the performance this week of the portfolio, this is net account value, all these numbers. So at the beginning of the week, Monday, we were at $127,754. I contributed $4,103.99 this week from mine and my wife's paychecks or whatever other income we had. I also received a reimbursement from my company. I do have to travel and do some things for my company sometimes, and I'm able to expense those on my credit card, and then I get reimbursed on them at the end of the month. So I got some of that back, and then only had to withdraw $196 this week, which is great. So, and then the big news this week is how much it went up. So my investment gains were $7,126. So that's the bulk of the gains this week, which is amazing because it has not been that way for pretty much the entire year. So you can see the ending value is up almost $12,000. So that's my net contributions plus the investment change. And all in all, I beat all of the indexes again. So this is the second week in a row that I beat all of the indexes. So 5.85% return compared to, 3.99, 3.58, 4.68, and 3.07. So happy about that. And then the purchases this week. Like I said, I split the 4103 and purchased these assets. So SCHD is the dividend growth, and then the rest of this is high yield. So I split it between some holdings that were very low allocated, and I'm going to go into that a little bit more here in a second when I show exactly how I purchase. And then these are the dividends I've received so far for the week. JEPI, HOOW, GPIQ, which this is the Velocity Impact Fund. So the money I received from this, the dividends I received from this fund get donated. GPIX, XPay, nice payout from XPay this week. And then the normal Friday stuff, all the DTEs from Roundhill, and then XQQI and XSPI, which I invested more into this week as well. So going over to the options trades real quick for this week. Same tickers I've been trading for the last 5 weeks since the beginning of March. No different this week. I'm just rolling with the punches on these. They're doing well for me, so I'm happy. I'm going to keep going with them until I feel like otherwise. So last week, all of the positions I had open expired worthless, which is great. Didn't have to pay anything to close them, and I wasn't assigned on any of them. So I opened up new positions yesterday on all 3 of the same tickers, same quantities. Similar deltas. I'm getting a bit more aggressive on BITX, which I'll show you here in a second why. But you can see the total premium I received for just this week was $285.35, and that gives me a total for the month of April of $512.70. Going over to BITX and why I'm getting a little bit more aggressive with it. So here's the put that I sold yesterday. You can see I've got a long history of being assigned here on these positions. So I was assigned on November of last year 100 shares and February of this year another 100 shares. So I have 200 shares right now that I'm sitting on and trying to wheel out of. And how I'm doing that is selling 5 contracts at a time. And the reason why I'm selling 5 is because and why I'm getting more aggressive is because if I get assigned at this $16, you can see right now my adjusted cost basis after factoring all this premium I've received and any debits when I've had to close out positions, it's dropped from, it was like 30, like in the mid 30s here. It's dropped all the way from there to 28.24. But even getting $171 in premium, it dropped it 80 cents. So it's just a little slower than I would like. I actually am I think leaning towards trying to get assigned more. So I went a little bit more aggressive at the 16 strike, and let me just pop over to the graph and show you real quick. Last week I had a 13, which was all the way down here, but I went all the way up to the 16. It was like a 25 delta. So I'm getting a tad bit more aggressive. I actually considered selling at the money because I want to get assigned, but I decided to collect a little premium and still maybe drag it out a little longer, so we'll see. And the reason why I am trying to get assigned is because, let me show you what would happen. So if you take this number, the 5 contracts, which is 500 shares, right? Let me just do this the easy way. So if you do $16 strike times 500 shares, which if I was assigned on these contracts would be a total of, sorry, I can't do math. It would be 1,600 times 5 times 5, do it equals. So it'd be $8,000. So if I punch, so you can see right now it's at 28.24. If I had to buy those contracts at $8,000, it would lower my cost basis all the way to, because now this would be 700 shares, not 200 shares, from 28.24 down to 19.50. So it drops it more than $9 if I have to buy those shares. And yes, I'm sitting on those shares and paying margin on them, but the chances of wheeling out of this when BITX is sitting at 17.13, my strike would go from all the way up here in this range to all the way down here in this range. So I'm kind of hopeful that I get assigned pretty soon, and I may get more aggressive with my strikes to do so. And that's the reason why, because I want to wheel out of these 200 shares. But it's so low right now, if I keep doing what I'm doing, it's going to take months, if not another year, to get out of them. So that's where we are on that. So, and then real quickly, the other two positions, SOXL sold the 61 strike, which is down here. You can see the run up the last few days. And TQQQ, I sold the 44 strike, which is right here. So it's pushing up against past the 50, up over the 200 here. So some weird intersections here. So that's where we're sitting right now with the options trades. Let me get out of here. Now, last but not least, I want to show kind of my thought process. So normally, so if my wife gets paid, which is what happened this past Friday, she got paid, she will Zelle me the money. Money goes into my Chase account. I have a different account set up specifically. And the reason why is because if I have the money go directly into my Schwab, either brokerage account or checking account, if I have bills that come out, it'll take from that. And I don't like that. So I have it go into a separate bank account with Chase, and then I transfer it over manually. That way, the second that I transfer it into the account, I can immediately invest it and I don't have to worry about bills coming out or something like that and taking from that money. It's not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, but it's like one extra step in my head. So it's easier just to transfer it manually. So she will Zelle me the money. It goes into my account. And then I immediately transfer it into Velocity Portfolio, which is my Schwab brokerage account. And then I invest it accordingly. So what I do typically is I will take a calculator. Okay, I've got this much money that I deposited. This week it was 4103, right? I will take that and then look at my allocations first. So I go up to my allocations and I look first. Okay, how are we doing target wise? Yesterday when I looked, my growth target was like 29 point or 28.9 or something like that, real close to this 25%. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to invest anything into growth, because there's really three categories here, right? High yield, growth, and dividend growth. So my initial instinct was, okay, I'm not going to put anything into growth. These were a tad bit lower. This was at like 34. This was at like 39. So I said, okay, that's easy. I'm going to, instead of splitting the deposit, the 4103 deposit into three, I'm going to split it into two, into half. And I'm going to put half into high yield, half into dividend growth. Okay, cool. So I've got that in my head. I get a calculator out. I'll have two calculators on my computer. One will show half of that deposit. The other one will show half of the other deposit. Then at that point, I start looking at individual diversifications. I will look at the percentage of allocation to the portfolio as a whole and look at the ones that are the lowest. So yesterday, it was when I was looking, XSPI, IYRI, and IHI were all very low, like 0.13% of the portfolio. So those were the first ones I looked at. And then I looked at BTCI and HOOW just because I was down so much on them capital gains wise and total return wise. So I wanted to average down on some of these. So I looked at the ones that I was down the most on, and those were BTCI and HOOW. Knowing that I was down the most on them, I still wanted to double check the diversification to make sure that they weren't larger than 5% or pushing 5% of allocation. And as I had mentioned, you can see IYRI, these three here, I doubled the allocation, but they're still small, right? But if you look at HOOW, which is right here, and you look at BTCI, which is somewhere in here, right here, these were low as well, because I might have been able to say, okay, well, I could put more into XPay, but it's already 3.81%. So I'm trying to balance these out kind of and buy the lowest one. So it's kind of a balancing act between which ones am I down the most on? What is the allocation in the total portfolio? Does it make sense to buy more of these, even though they're a larger percentage, or are they a less percentage? Ideally, it's a lesser percentage of the total portfolio, and I'm down quite a bit on them. Then I'm really averaging down in both regards. So that's what I decided to do. So I bought more of these three here because they were such a small allocation, and I was down a little bit on them. But then I bought BTCI and HOOW because they were still a relatively small percentage of my portfolio, BTCI here and HOOW, and I was down pretty substantially on them, so I wanted to average down on them. So I went ahead and did that. And then a little less complicated on the dividend growth because I've only got 7 holdings in there. And I didn't want to go with, because if I look at like PG, it's such a small percentage. I just didn't want to go, I'm up so much on it. I just don't like, there's a mental block I get when I average up. I don't like averaging up. So if I'm up large on a position, especially with a small allocation like this, if I were to buy more, it's going to push the cost basis up to where around where it is now. And I know that's maybe not the way I should think, but I try to average down whenever possible, whenever it makes sense. So my argument to myself on this was, well, I don't want to put more into a single ticker. So I'm trying to not have as many single tickers as you can see in my portfolio. So the options were a DGRO, which is already up at 4.34. The other option was IDVO, which is pretty much at my max allocation that I want per holding. So it wasn't going to be that one. And then the other one was SCHD, which was a little bit lower than this. It was around near 4. And I'm actually down a little bit on SCHD. And it was a bit easier yesterday because of the 7 holdings in dividend growth. It was the only position I was down on. These were all up. So that made my decision to buy SCHD pretty simple. I would like to add more to PG, but like I said, it's just not a priority at the moment. If it has a bad earnings and tanks or something like that, then absolutely. But I have no problem continuing to lower my cost basis on the funds themselves. So that was how I decided to make the purchases. That's how I do it every week. Quick recap, get my money, transfer it in. If it's my paycheck, it goes directly into my account. I transfer it over. As soon as I transfer it, I open up Snowball Analytics, which is right here. And I look at these allocations, and then I look at the individual diversifications based on which positions I'm down the most on in the categories that I'm looking to put money into, because I want to average down. And then I split the deposit accordingly, either 2 ways, 3 ways. And then from there, I try to split it kind of evenly throughout those positions. So I tried to split it, you can see, somewhat evenly between BTCI. You can see that the amounts are all about the same, right? So I try to split it pretty evenly amongst those positions. There might be a situation where I'm just down big on one, like say PG. Let's say PG had earnings next week and they just tank, right? I have no issues with putting all of my deposit into PG if it made sense. Obviously, you got to believe in the companies that you're investing in and the funds you're investing in. So that's just kind of a quick rundown of how I invest my entire income every week. And it's nice because I've mentioned many times my wife and I get paid on alternating Fridays. So we get paid, or I have money coming in that I can invest every single Friday of every single week, which is really nice from a dollar cost average perspective. I don't worry about buying early. I don't worry about things tanking on Monday and Tuesday and feeling like I need to get in. I just know that I have money coming in every Friday. I will make my purchases on Friday regardless, and I will dollar cost average according to my portfolio. If a situation arises where it just makes sense to add a new ticker or something like that, then I will. I have thought about selling out of QQQ and SPY just to allocate into other things because I don't really see myself adding more to these in the near term. But I don't have a problem just holding them either. So anyways, quick rundown on how I spend my income every week in the portfolio, how I live out of the brokerage. If you guys have any questions or want me to cover something more in depth in this topic or any topic, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to do a video specifically for it and explain a little bit more on what I'm doing here. Thank you all for watching. Have a good weekend, and I'll see everybody next